Aloha, welcome home. Here we are in another Pono podcast, part of the campaign Aloha's initiative to continue to spread awareness and bring light to all the magical, beautiful, impactful things that are happening as we're moving through this great transformation and this movement of world peace and love, unity, sovereignty. And I'm Jonah Martin Lyon. I'm here and honored to be sitting with brother Michael Keolomau Tengan. And we had the opportunity to sink in very briefly and listen to his brilliance in our last roundtable Aloha Town Hall that we had, and bringing in this science and technology. And so I look forward to really learning more about what that looks like in the Keolomau ways. So with that, I just want to invite Michael on into the space right now and really just go into learning more and sharing an enlightened conversation with you. So welcome home, my brother. Aloha.
Mahalo for that introduction. So when I was a child, I used to have seizures, and I had these grand mal seizures, one of which put me in a coma. Wasn't a long coma, but a coma is, a freaking coma. So I was out for about 36 hours in the hospital. And it was after this, I think I was around age 7, that they being Western medical sciences hadn't identified any real source of it, and seizures to this day are still interesting phenomena overall. However, my grandmother at that time wanted to protect me. This is my grandma Margaret, my tutu on the Hawaiian side, and it's from the Kamaka family out of Kauai on the east side. And she gifted me the name of Keolomau. And so Keolomau, which translates to everlasting life, was an incredibly powerful name. It's one that I kind of used here and there. I used it in high school for my Olelo Hawaii class in Hawaiian language. I used it at my first job at the Maui Tropical Plantation as a tour driver way back when. And then I didn't use it at all for probably about 20 plus years. And the thing about Hawaiian names is that it carries kuleana, it carries weight, it carries a gravity in and of itself, because it's to a certain degree a life's path. It, for me, is a mantle that I wear. It's a name that I go by. However, it's more so the responsibilities that I carry. And so Keolomau, which translates to everlasting life, for a long time, I always equated it to just health. It was part of what really inspired me to go on the path that I'm currently on. And at this point in time, I perceive it differently. Everlasting life is more like an eternal life concept, in terms of, to a certain degree, the reconnection to source, the reclamation of self and identity, and to live a life in service. And so that's what really guides the pillars of Keolomau as an entity in and of itself, and then also with the work that I do now. A lot of it ties to what each and every one of us are going through in terms of our collective and personal awakenings, which, kind of brings the question, well, what are we awakening to? What are we awakening from? And is it, I feel there's a lot in terms of this concept of being woke, and it's a process, at least for me, from my perspective. It's something that's ongoing. Deeper and deeper and deeper within inside of ourselves we go, and there's always something to wake up to. Always. And as an ongoing process, it's something that we get to really connect, not just to the depths of ourself, capital S, the brilliance and mystery of source consciousness itself. And so, aloha mai kako, Michael Keolomau Tengan, although I pretty much just go by Keolomau nowadays. Really happy to be here. Jonah, thank you for hosting this and holding this container for people to come, to share, to express, and to connect. I feel like it's an incredibly, in the past 3 years, an incredibly important piece to be able to still connect in whatever way, shape, and form we can. And starting to see a lot of that in terms of how much has been thrust into the digital world makes for, I feel, a platform that really is inviting to conversations just like this. So very happy to be here.
Wow, brother. Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you for, sharing a bit more about your personal story, as well. And what a awakening through that experience of the coma, and the gifting, which I also see as an earning, and an intuitive reflection and feeling into like that Kuleana has shared, the purpose and for your tutu to bring that in. This is kind of an initiation that is an ongoing initiation as part of our rites of passage in life, that we receive these names by elders, by our community, the kind of external environment that is seeing how we show up in a way, and it's really like sets forth a becoming, it's also an ongoing process. I'm always becoming. So like, what am I becoming can be a constant, question, right, in every single moment. And so I love it. Like I've been wanting to ask you this question of Keolomau, like what the meaning of that is, and the depth in which you already shared is greatly appreciated. And to come to the container place too. I was feeling into just talking a little bit story about the container that you invited me into shortly after me moving to Maui, and coming in the container of the Aloha Spirit Law, and that really upholding the integrity as well as a kuleana to be good stewards of, and how we are shepherding that law, which also I just learned for the first time that like to look at the acronym of law, which I like to look at as love always wins is an acronym, but then it also comes into land, air, and water, and the laws of nature, and coming into that. And I know that you have so much wisdom, around our connection to our nature, our environment, our external environment, but how our internal environment is relating to that external environment is much of the lessons and learnings that I receive and codes I receive by being in your presence and having these conversations. So for those of you that are here listening into it, just kind of give you a brief Aloha Spirit Law setting container. Aloha aka'ai, meaning kindness to be expressed with tenderness. You want to take the L, bro? We'll do a little team effort. We'll play with
Oh
it
yeah,
right
sure,
now.
sure. Lo kahi, and then that can be, unity and togetherness.
Oh, olu olu, meaning agreeable to be expressed with pleasantness.
Ha'a ha'a, humility.
Aho nui, patience, perseverance, waiting for the right moment. And so coming into that, this container of aloha together, and how that's really being I feel a place to recenter, recalibrate, and come back into, am I in alignment with aloha? Am I living aloha? On my way here to literally drop in with you, the car in front of me that I was following to get home had a bumper sticker that said living aloha, and it just like brought me into that, like, am I living aloha? In
Yeah.
that way. So yeah,
It's really important. especially during driving. Not as much here in Hawaii, well, at least in Maui. Oahu's its own thing. We got a lot more of that, I feel, on the on Maui and probably some of the other islands as well. Yet it's always a poignant reminder for sure.
On
Yeah.
that, bro, like maybe something to go into, I want to circle back around, touch base with you on Keolomau. Is there more there that you would like to share in this space here together and sink in on that and just let us unfold, and be in this moment?
Yeah. Well, for years, the name was merely a name. I knew the mo'olelo, the story behind it, grandma's intention in gifting it to be very protective. And I feel like both with Keolomau and then also with Aloha, there's something, with Hawaiian words, which is really something to be very present with. Part of it being the direct translation, the direct translation of the word. Another part and piece of it being more of the hidden meaning within it, and then the spiritual significance. And I feel like I've gone through the different iterations of Keolomau, and it's gone through different layers. Everlasting life, when I first looked at it as a literal translation, I saw that as a way of protection. And then I also, though, kind of taking a step further, realized that it was part of my life's work. Yet for years, kind of searched in that vein of what that even means, right? And so I started to dive deeply into not just health, with like looking at my background being in 2006. Well, I'll take it a step back. So previously, when I was living in Okinawa from 2002 to 2005, my life's path was going to go into therapy. And I was looking at working with family systems here in Hawaii. And so that was part of what led me to Okinawa, was being more immersed in the culture. And then my Uncle Dave, my mom's younger brother, passed away suddenly at 50. And he, for me, was like very much like a father in my life. My dad wasn't around when I was growing up. And so being in a single parent home, I really longed for like a positive male role model. And I feel like that in and of itself will be a conversation that we talk about in terms of one of the greatest things that we as men can do in this day and age, and to be that for others. I didn't have that. And so having experienced what it was like not to have that figure in my life, when Uncle Dave and I really got connected was when I went off to college, and he lived in Oregon. I was going to school in Oregon. And so his passing was difficult, to say the least, and drastically altered my life's direction, which I feel in life we have, the greatest gift that we can give is our presence to each other. And in death, there is still a present for us to gift. And for him was a new life's path. And so everything changed. I went into personal training. I went into high performance athletics, corporate wellness consultation, community health advocacy. And that kind of got me to a place where I really started to ask more questions about, well, what is life, right? Because I'm experiencing it. I know how to tweak things here and there. However, there's much more to it. And so 2009 on, I started to really go off into meditation, mental strategies, visualizations, which started to get me more into personal development in 2011, which then sent me down the rabbit hole in everything from Kabbalistic, ceremonial, magical practices, to Gnosticism, to the I Ching and Chinese systems, to Vedic systems, and kind of looking at everything. I deep dove into everything from parapsychology and sort of 1970s government programs on psychic abilities, all sorts of things. And I started to go further and further with it, which was amazing in and of itself, yet ultimately didn't fully resonate. Because as I continued to look, along and through this lens of Keolomau, I wasn't fully connecting with what felt right, you know, and kind of on that point in terms of science and spirituality. It was something that was historically, one and the same. And a lot of it then became separated and segmented. And in that was where we have more of this now dualistic dynamic that plays out. And as that plays out, one of the things that has come into play is differentiating the two, when I still feel they're one and the same. Being able to look at something in its parts and pieces is fine. However, how does that relate to the whole? And how does that interrelationship allow us to be more connected overall? And so kind of to the point on, as we're talking about law, we identify, when we look around us, certain laws of nature, and they are definitely relevant here and now. And in looking at where we are within, here on Maui, in Hawaii, in the middle of the Pacific, on planet Earth, within this solar system, within the Milky Way galaxy, are subject to laws that are not necessarily consistent throughout the known universe. Because at the center of our galaxy is a black hole. And as we look at that concept of polarity on the opposite end of the spectrum, are white hole galaxies, areas of eternal, everlasting life. And so I started to become more curious about this whole concept. And, part of going into the I Ching, for example, a number that continues to this day to be one of my guiding stars is 64. And so looking at everything from DNA to genetic codons to accessing the totality of human potentiality has gone sort of into the more of the hidden aspects of history, which, looking at everything again from all those different systems, tracing it back and coming to a point post deluge where everything was washed clean, kind of like a whiteboard that's wiped off. We're looking at these figures, the Apakalu, as they're called, the 7 sages who effectively reseeded civilization. And a lot of it kind of goes into like Sumerian texts of like Enki and Enlil and these different figures, and then can go into, the Vedic tradition as well, and to like the Krishnas and so on and so forth. There are these figures, right? And the pantheons, if you will, these larger than life beings. And, we often have looked at them as, to a certain degree, these guiding lights in terms of these different pathways. And I don't know, I started to question, well, what if, we're here now, if these Apakalu, these beings who then reseeded the world, were truly benevolent, would we be here now? Like what happened between way back when and what we're experiencing today? And so that kind of went into a very different direction for me. The tools, the technologies and techniques that I had been studying for, I guess altogether, if it goes into way back into like psychology as well, going on like almost 2 decades, there are always holes, there are always gaps. It was mostly resonant, yet there's always a sensation that something else was missing. And so me, with a curious mind, kept on looking and researching and investigating, and both in terms of, reading through literature, yet deep meditation as well. Direct experiential learning, if you will. And so that's kind of a really long answer to your question. However, where I have ended up is, I guess, redefining things and using direct cognitive experience as a guideline, and knowing that right now is truly an age of miracles, that things are happening, and we are going through a process where each and every one of us holds a crucial piece of a collective puzzle. And so a lot of it comes down to then genius, legacy, and collective. And genius being the fullest expression of ourself, being able to anchor and express as much of our 15-dimensional identity as we are capable of embodying, and how that leads to our legacy work, the thing that we were really here to do. And that's usually much bigger than any one person can on their own accomplish, which then brings in a collective, a group of people who share the intention of whatever it is and can pour their attention into the fulfillment of that. And I kind of think of, for me, who grew up like canoe paddling, I got to think of like getting a boat into the water. All right, you got a 6-man canoe. I can't do that on my own. Like, it's just whatever the movie Moana does. Like, that's a heavy boat. Like, no one person can just move a heavy ass canoe, especially if it's going to be a sailing canoe on their own. That stuff's heavy. And so it takes a team. It takes a group. It takes a village. It takes a collective, a hui. And so the intention of getting that in, right, may take 20 people. However, once the boat is actually in, once the canoe is actually in the water, then there's only going to be 6 people rowing it. And so those 6 people are then going to collectively get together and do something magnificent. And when everyone is in a place of resonance, co-resonance, synchronization, the boat moves in ways that it just skims the surface of the water. And when that happens, it's nothing short of magical, because it almost feels like you're flying. And so being able to identify that, each and every person having a specific seat in the boat or seat at the collective table, being able to let that boat or table in this case be an intention, a shared intention, and then being able to continue to work together, here and there, correcting a little bit. If we're heading on a voyage, then the steersman is inevitably going to be checking the horizon. It's going to be checking the stars if it's going to be like a longer journey. And so we need to be able to have that shared intention to create a collective experience, and everyone just falls into their place of speciality. And so a big part of what Keolomau is now, having launched, is the fulfillment of that. And stage 1 is really just getting people connected to their genius. So I'm serving someone as a vision actualizer. Sounds about right. And being able to work with a person or teams in terms of what that vision looks like. Because often what we access just for our own bioenergetic systems comes from a very specific place. That left hemisphere, the masculine aspect, the egoic piece. When we're able to shift into that right hemisphere individually and especially collectively to create a shared vision of something, holds power, holds capacity. And then being able to then, realize that and actualize that in some way, shape, or form is an incredible piece to it, yet ties directly to our genius. And even the word genius, though, is pretty genius, because if you look at like the actual etymology of it, it implies, per what the Greeks believed, that there is a guardian spirit that each and every one of us has, and that genius is in relationship to the connection and expression of this guardian intelligence. And in this case, for me, it's more a matter of our greater intelligence, our higher identity, and allowing that aspect of ourselves to be expressed through self. So that's a lot. I mean, basically, I guess with Keolomau, it is a step to support us in our collective legacy of genius.
I love the distillation right there, and I've experienced firsthand the work that you're bringing, that you're sharing, that you've experientially walked through in your own path and your own development to continue to come into relationships and awareness and awakening to your genius and your legacy, and through that process can now bring that and offer it in a way of supporting others to find their genius and to come into their purpose and their kuleana. And so, you know, you bringing this to the world right now is like this is the right moment. You know, this is the moment that we need this science, this technology to um, to evolve collectively. You know, and we do that through our own individual process as well of our self evolution. You know, our evolution, revolution, right? Like in terms of like looking at revolution with a different lens than what we may have some type of stereotype, stigma, or preconceived notion and perception of what revolution is. Coming back to the galactic perspective of what revolution looks like, you know, that like we're aboard this ship, this canoe called planet Earth right now, you know, that's revolving around, you know, this central sun, which is part of a larger galaxy. This galaxy, this Milky Way galaxy, is part of a larger, you know, and it's just like it continues to expand out to the infinite. And our relationship with that, you know, really comes back to like my relationship to that is the relationship to the higher self. You know, capitalizing it for me, I'll write down self and utilize an acronym of like a sentient enlightened life form. You know, the self, right, is a sentient being, and I'm in the process of enlightening myself through life, and inform, and that everything matters. You know, some things may matter more than others, but everything matters. There's nothing that does not matter. You know, interconnectedness of it all. And so I just really want to, you know, say like, you know, when hearing more about your story and speaking into it now, going in depth, like how awesome it is to know you, to work, you know, in this way, side by side, you know, and on this walk together of self-actualization, and how we are walking that within ourselves, and also inviting others, you know, to come into that. Like, how can we support each other in self-actualization? You know, you brought up also the having a male role model, you know, some in life, and how important that is. And you know, I specifically, in the same way you wore your shirt, I specifically wore the shirt that I'm wearing right now, the Sacred Sons shirt, because it's like so much the intention of this men's organization. You know, it's like the men's work, and then there's the actualization, which is the work of men. You know, right? It's like doing the internal work of self, and then how that can be brought to the collective, you know, as the work of men.
Right.
And much of that work is reclaiming and remembering what it is to be in the space of the father archetype, you know, that is wearing the hats of, you know, of the sovereign, of the lover, of the warrior, of the magician, you know, and then how that we can call upon these archetypal energies there uh, to navigate what's needed in any given moment. Is this a time for me to be in my king, or is this a time for me to be in my lover, you know, or is this a time to like warrior up, you know? So it's and so having all these technologies that are more becoming more mainstream, if you will. They're more accessible than they ever have been. You know, coming back to the technology that you're speaking about earlier, you know, we're at a time where we have this technology and this information in our hands. You know, we're able to connect at any point in time all the way around the world, and to share, these codes, share our genius with one another. And so the rapid acceleration of self-actualization, of coming into our genius, and how we can do this together, how we can paddle this canoe together and look at, okay, well, where are we going, on this canoe? Where is this canoe headed, so that I know, is this the six that I want to, be paddling with right now? Because we need to be all in alignment with each other if we're going to get to that destination.
Right.
And so, yeah,
absolutely, man. Absolutely. I'm going to just close this email thing. I forgot that this was still open, so I don't get the little notifications. Okay, that's close. Speaking of technology.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I feel like that's such an important piece, because I'm reminded of this study. This is way back when, probably 2014, 15, of our attention. And we're seeing this with, to a certain degree, the conditioning via the technology that we carry, right? Is it a matter of us utilizing the technology that we carry, or are we being used by it? And I do believe it goes both ways. That sort of Pavlovian response when there's an indication, a note, a chime, and like, oh, what could that be? With information, especially. Now, let me just think about this real fast. There is a study where there was something like, there was 2 rooms and there was a hallway between the 2 rooms. The first room, people were given something to memorize, and there were different, amount of words that they could memorize. And then they were meant to go down the hallway to the other room and then to recall it. In that hallway, they are offered either a fruit bowl or a piece of cheesecake. And anything beyond 7 characters or words or whatever it was, almost everyone chose the cheesecake. And so the implication being that there's a stressed response when we have more than 7 choices in front of us. And so as we look at then just the abundance of information that we quite literally now hold in our hands, there is a level of discernment, I feel, and this comes more in accessing our own intuitive talents, whether we're more kinesthetic, psychic, energetic, or empathic, to be able to leverage our own intuitive abilities to discern what that is, because not everything that desires our attention necessarily deserves it. The advertisements that the algorithm has extracted from my Google search, for example, and is placing into my Facebook ads or whatever, that might be something that be like, oh, look, right? That might catch my attention. Yet if I'm hopping on to do a post about awareness or to repost an article about consciousness or whatnot, and I get, distracted and sidetracked, then ultimately our ability to discern and also to focus, just looking at, generally speaking, our attention spans and how they've changed, something as simple as reading a book nowadays, or to sit like we're doing now in conversation, to allow each of us to share, which I feel like we're doing terrific on, in terms of just the allowance of that expression and just really listening. And so, I feel like that's a big part, especially now, and especially tied to the concept of genius, is being able to discern where it is that we place our attention and how our intentions can really help to act as a filter for that. Especially with just the sheer velocity of technology, at least in terms of like the digital aspects. Now talking about everything from not just the, decentralized cryptocurrency, but also being able to create these entire worlds within the digital realm. It's going to be really interesting to see how things really emerge in terms of things around virtual reality, tying it into artificial intelligence, being able to look at things related to how that then is integrated in these more like quantum level computing systems, and how reality is going to be much more prominent in a digital space. I mean, digital real estate, man. Like it's the whole concept of the metaverse and where that's going. And I feel like a lot of that, especially now, is a good time here and now to really work on that discernment piece, which does require us to shift from that left hemisphere and back into the right hemisphere, accessing those intuitive abilities so we can drop into those deeper, just knowing sensations. And that is, I feel, especially as it comes around, again, that just the pace of where development around technology is going now, being able to balance the velocity of quote unquote advancement within the technological sphere with being able to have and hold a high, as high as we can at least, level of consciousness as well.
That's powerful right there, Brian. This is, I love that you gave me the Okinawa piece too, because what you remind me of in our interaction is like a living samurai, and instead of it being what it used to be around perception around samurai and the combativeness of that, really, it was more of protection than combativeness, coming back to the protection piece. But there's also right now like the sword, and you wield your words in the way that a samurai wields his sword. So it's another reason why,
Wow.
like you're bringing your work to the social media technology, to the virtual real estate, if you will, is you're claiming with powerful stewardship an honorable and virtuous platform for people to come and access their genius. And so I just want to honor you and acknowledge the work that you've done on yourself to be able to be at this point right now of offering that. And even like coming into the intuitive piece, right, is like that is something that as men is a muscle that isn't necessarily as strong as it is for women. That the women's intuition is a real thing, and it's part of the evolutionary piece of needing that because of being woman, physically needing the intuitive guidance for protection of self, and protection of young, right, of their offspring. And so as men, how do we strengthen that? What are some exercises, right? It's like we'll go to the gym and we'll strengthen up our our muscles, and we strengthen up our physical bodies. That's what we're familiar with. But like in terms of strengthening our intuition and that internal compass for navigation, of the Merkaba vehicle that we are piloting at all times, what are some ways and that you feel strongly in your own experience that you just like help to support strengthening your intuition?
Yeah. Well, great question. I want to pause real fast because as you're talking, I was reminded of something I wanted to acknowledge as well. And it is that dynamic of stewardship that you have mentioned a few times now. I just want to acknowledge that because that's such a huge guiding principle that is relevant, so relevant, more relevant now than it ever has been, especially as there is so much that is put into ownership. And that's ownership, not just of like here in Hawaii with like real estate, which it absolutely is something here in Hawaii with real estate, who owns the land, right? And that ownership and what that affords a person. But also in relationship. I feel like a lot of things that we've been, especially as men, and coming back to men's work, the concept of ownership and relationship, like my woman, there's these claims in terms of this possessiveness, which I feel like is in and of itself, and we'll definitely talk about this later. However, however, I wanted to just acknowledge that, because stewardship in terms of the concept of like malama aina, caring for, and the stewardship of a thing, it's not mine, yet part of my responsibility, part of my privilege is to be able to take care of this ... and to be conscientious of it. And I feel like, back to intuition, in Western culture, a lot of what we have seen is based upon fallacy. And it is, very much in Western culture, it's almost revered how we can, in our quote unquote sciences, identify things and isolate it. And I feel like that level of focus often comes at the expense of more of the holistic viewpoint of things. Yet,
can you elaborate on fallacy a bit? I feel like there's some
sure.
some juice in that.
A big guiding light for science, especially in terms of what we identify it as today, came from Isaac Newton and the concept of more Newtonian physics. The irony of that, though, is that Newton was a high-ranking Mason, and kind of this concept of Freemasonry, which the lexicon of Freemasonry, if you look through this, there is so much more that is and part of, and I think it is a 33-degree order, that the Masons knew to be well beyond the physical. And so if then a high-ranking member who not just participated in an organization like this was, stayed with it to the point where he was able to achieve a high-ranking position, knew that there was much more to the world than what meets the eye, yet asserted strongly and created an entire paradigm around limitation, or rather focus of attention upon our own physicality, yet knowing well that there was much more beyond that. Has created, kind of through, as it ripples through time and space, a condition for our culture in Western civilization that looks at identifying and really intentionally focusing awareness on just the physical world, while knowing that there's more to it. And so I feel like there has been, we can kind of bounce around all day why. However, the output is that a large part of Western society has now focused awareness on what's directly in front of us. Yet if you look at Polynesian civilizations, if you look at Asian civilizations, this concept of spirituality, the connection to the unseen world, relationship to our own intuition, is much more balanced. And so the capacity in terms of the reclamation of those intuitive aspects comes down to what I see as coherence. And so a lot of, we wake up in the morning, the alarm goes off, we have our routine, put on the coffee maker, use the bathroom, turn on the news. A lot of people have a routine in the world, and that helps to reaffirm a pattern. Yet a lot of what that does is also it, to a certain degree, repatterns our natural biological systems to be much more focused on our left hemisphere. when I talk about left hemisphere, left hemisphere of the brain is much more of that masculine aspect, linear in thought, analytical, methodical, great with physicality, and helps to really focus on systems and patterns, where the right hand side, the feminine, much more imaginative, emotional, creative, and is directly tied to our intuitive abilities. And so it's not that they're not there, it's just we're working out chest, shoulders, and triceps Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we don't even touch the legs. And so there's an effect, right? There's an effect. Big upper torso and body, itty bitty legs. And so that's kind of been the process. And so as we look at that in terms of, back to your analogy of the gym, I would say there's a lot of things that can be done. And it also kind of depends on which intuitive ability is more of your cup of tea. And so for me, for example, I'm a energetic kinesthetic. So my primary intuitive ability is tied to just energy at large. And that within the body is housed within my metabolic system and directly tied to my digestive system. So the enteric nervous system, from esophagus all the way down to anus and everything in between, and the lining that comes into play, both with the fascial encasings as well as the linings of those organs themselves, is one of my primary areas of intuition. And then secondary, because it will be usually, at least again, this is my perspective, there'll be a primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. And my secondary is kinesthetic, so tied to my musculoskeletal system. My body tells me a lot. Our bodies tell us a lot anyway. However, I'm a bit more able, I guess, to discern what's coming up. And so I have very body-based experiences. I'll go into some place and I'll feel like a pang in my shoulder and know that there's something that's just not Pono in that place. That could be anything from, a battle that happened there like hundreds of years ago, to perhaps chemical waste that's being dumped there right now, and anything in between. And so as we get into that area of those two being my primary, and then my other areas would be psychic and then empathic. So for me, not my weakest link, the area of greatest opportunity has been in my emotional body. And that's been definitely my focus for the last 3 years. However, getting there, I would say one is getting into an unstructured space, because the left hemisphere loves structure, loves order, loves organization. And I love all those things as well. However, to be able to shift into that right hemisphere requires us to be able to deprogram ourselves. So time with the boys, for example, when we're just playing, we're just running around and we're playing outside. We're in nature, which is also another great thing to do as well. Being able to just be in a flow, and rather than having to feel like we're directing or controlling, just to allow and embrace would be one. Two, our nervous systems are generally shot. So much of the condition of today puts us in a fight or flight response. And so being in that brainwave frequency and that pattern, and the effect upon heart rate variability and subtleties of stress within the body, means that the more that we can drop into lower states or more centered states, mid-range alpha within the brain, a more coherent heart rate variability section, allows us then to balance out that energy as it flows between hemispheres. Breath work, I love, coherence breathing is, I'll do that many times throughout the day. Meditation helps as well. And then once we're able to get into a more free-flowing state, become more coherent in that moment, then it opens up to those 4 arenas of intuition. And I feel like it's different for each. The energetic, I'll do the energetic last. The kinesthetic is just very body-based. And so I do a lot with fascial release techniques, and then I also do a lot with mobility. Then I'll also, though, do a lot with multi-directional movement patterns. So a lot with like kettlebells and battle maces and then do it in a way that requires like multi-directional planar motions, so that I have to really just be there in that moment. And I find when I get into especially like a high intensity interval workout, or if I'm trail running, where I just have to be so attuned. Actually, one of my favorite things is being in the stream bed and then just jumping rocks, like going to Kepaniwai in Iao Valley, or going out towards the bamboo forest, and then just jumping on rocks. Because if I'm not fully present in that moment in my body, I eat shit and I fall on a bunch of rocks. And so the feedback loop is pretty strict. And yet at the same time, at least for me, what happens is when I'm so in tune with that very moment physically, it opens up all sorts of creativity. So when I'm stuck on a problem, for example, then I'll just take 20 minutes and I'll do something. And then all of a sudden things change. And so for kinesthetics, being very body-based is great. Mobility is wonderful. Doing things that are really less strenuous from the perspective of weight, and more intentional about connection to body seems to be something that's worked for me, at least. Psychics are a little different. Psychics being more party and privy to the realm of information. A lot of information, like Einstein, for example, like a fully functioning psychic can access all kinds of things from the universal cloud and download it through right hemisphere, yet it still needs to be able to process it through the left. And so everything from, Nostradamus, who was able to peek and peer through the constructs of time and space, to like Tesla, who was able to download these concepts and be able to, gift to the world, in his own way. Things happened. But be able to process that information and then be able to express it and share it is great. Psychics, though, because there's so much coming in from more of electrical frequency, are best served by being able to find that balance between hemispheres, take a break from, areas of high oscillation, Wi-Fi or cell phone towers. So getting out into nature that has its own resonance of in and of itself, and being able to tune to that frequency is great. Empaths, getting away from people is phenomenal. And then also being able to feel into what's theirs and what's not. I mean, each and every one has their own nuances, yet I would say the general pattern is the same. Enter into flow, become more coherent, and then be able to be intentional with that specific intuitive talent and type.
Hope all y'all got all that right there.
I'm doing a little longer segment on this on April 10th called Applied Intuition. So it'll go through more on this, but I mean, because again, this is sort of what's downloaded for me. There's parts and pieces that we can play with, both elemental with the different intuitive types. However, when we're looking at really true health and well-being, unless we're attending to our intuitive talents, then there's a part that we're missing, that we're still, even if we're not aware of it, still susceptible to.
So one of the exercises that I'm hearing in the take in a level of simplicity right now, for all the viewers, especially speaking to the men out there, I would consider us to be, men amongst men, with the work that we're doing on all those dimensions and levels. But on a simple thing, getting out into nature, to become one with nature again, to have that relationship within our own humanity, human nature. And it requires us to come into the awareness that we are not separate from this, but we are always a part of it. And how I'm navigating my external world has so much to do with how much how closely I know myself, right? So like if I know myself, going into a bamboo forest and jumping from rocks to rocks, I'm going to know, which path to take essentially on that, because I know what I'm capable of, in that. And at the same time, there's going to be surprises along the way that allow for the stretch to naturally and organically happen, that is going to take me out of my familiarity or out of my comfort zone. In the same way, that's where we're going to grow our muscles in the gym, is to get out of the comfort zone and go past the capacity of what I'm used to. Is the only way to promote growth in the body. And so I feel like, that really to anchor in the simple practice of getting out of the box that we find ourselves in. A lot of men find ourselves literally sitting at a desk, at a square box, inside of a box, inside of another box, and, going home and watching a box. And, it's like, now we're spiritual beings in form right now. We need to be moving about in a cyclic or circular way, multi-dimensional way, to really grow and to access all of these parts of ourselves. And so, April 10th, I'm hearing that you'll be going deeper into this intuitive learning, intuitive guidance, intuitive practice, and how to get more in there. We have about 3 minutes left, so I want to have that be time to share, last bit, what you have up and coming with Keolomau, some of the offerings, dates to come in. I know you organize it elementally as well, which is, something that I find also supports the relationship. Is like, what's my relationship with the elements? and Zola is reminding me to remember to say aloha keakua.
Aha.
Speaking of elements, right? I mean, right on time, right?
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, I want to thank you for that as well. The part of nature really does tie to closing things out, because there's a dynamic that plays out within each and every one of us, and it is in motion around us as well. And being able to reinsert into the spiritual ecology of existence is such an important piece, because we play a part in everything in the world around us, and it is a reflection of what we have cultivated within. And so that part, in terms of getting back out into nature, gosh, I could talk about that for days as well. is a really great recommendation. Regarding Keolomau, it is the continuation, the culmination and continuation of nearly 20 years of just curiosity in the world. And so
specifically, how would I connect to you and Keolomau? Like, how do I come in? Is there a course that I can sign up for?
Yes. So I've launched effectively a few things, and it's all housed at keolomau.com. And that is all online. Part of it is going to be tied to the vital body coaching, and so that's going to be sort of infusing spirituality into personal training, if you will. It looks at the balancing of the 4-body system: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Applied intuition, which is going to be launching April 10th, and that's basically the gym for your intuition. Also going to be launching the Genius Lab. And so that is looking at cultivating personal genius. That is a 1-part assessment, and then 3 parts semi-private group work, and then visual actualization, which is sort of a consulting piece, which is looking at being able to connect first with our higher intelligence, clarify that vision, and then bring it into the world, which is a 3-month program.
You want to add the last bit right there, Z?
Aloha. Right on.